Hello and welcome to episode 4 of Everything Delivery. In this podcast, we will discuss anything and everything that helps deliver value to clients while maintaining a healthy and happy organisation. I'm Dan Close and I'm here with my co-host Luca Lanziani, and today we're going to talk about LLMs and the potential they have for businesses. Stick with us if you want to understand how you can use LLMs or large language models to supercharge your products and move faster as an organisation. But first, let's talk a bit about our sponsor. So this episode of Everything Delivery is sponsored by Nearform. Nearform has over 10 years experience in remote delivery, empowering clients to succeed in a digital world through application modernization, data, design, DevOps, and product. You can find out more at nearform.com.
But also, if you're new to this podcast, there is another format that we launched recently, that is the Digital Pulse, where we discuss the latest news in the market. The last one was last week, where we discussed back to the office, ways of working, and data and LLM. If you want to find out that podcast, you can go to everything.delivery/Digital Pulse, and you will find all the relevant links there. So Dan, what are we going to talk about today?
So first off, we're going to talk about the value proposition for large language models or LLMs. So what can they do for you, help you move faster and help enhance your products? We're then going to talk very briefly about the history of AI. So how have we got to where we are, and where are these tools a good fit, and where may you want to look at alternatives? And then we'll finish out with a bit of a summary of how you can go about using these tools for yourself.
Great.
Sound good?
Yeah, it sounds good. So let's start from value, and I'm going to give you the main stage because, again, today you're going to be mainly speaking about this. You are the expert on this section.
Well, expert's a bit strong, but yeah, let's go.
So, what is the value?
Right. So let's start with something a bit more kind of broad, as in the value of the market, right? So LLMs are pretty much having their iPhone moment right now, right? So everyone from the tech sector through to effectively people in your local Starbucks are talking about large language models, or more often than not, they're talking about AI. So as of 2022, so this is kind of pre-ChatGPT really kind of exploding onto the scene, the AI market was kind of estimated to be something in the range of 135 billion US dollars. So there was a lot of interest in that. I imagine that's only gone up massively following the launch of OpenAI's stuff, right? And talking of OpenAI, they really are responsible for getting all of this stuff out in front of everyone. So we previously had things like DALL-E, there were previous iterations of ChatGPT, but it was really, I think, 3.5 where everything started to go a little bit wild. So off the back of that, we saw the kind of usual kind of consultancies and folks like Goldman weigh in on how this was going to impact jobs, right? So they started off by saying they think something like 300 million jobs are going to be exposed to some degree of automation off the back of these tools. They also think, that's kind of like one of the parts of doom and gloom, right? So everyone, it's a bit like the internet, it's a bit like computers, right? Everyone's going to lose their job, things are going to change massively. That may or may not turn out to be true. So there's a lot of negative stuff going on, but there's also the flip side, there's the positive. So what's that going to mean for market growth and people basically making more money, to very mercenary take on it. So both McKinsey and Goldman are quite pro this, right? So I think McKinsey is saying something like 2.6 to 4.4 trillion annually across, so I think they looked at 64 different use cases that they analysed. And then Goldman are predicting there could be a 7% annual growth over a 10-year period. These folks kind of know what they're talking about. They see a lot of things. So it's an interesting point to be at, right? But how do you, or how do we think those things, how's it going to manifest, right? So I think we've got two things that we can potentially talk about. So the first is staying not too far from kind of our comfort zone. The tech sector is like, how can you move faster? And then if you're moving faster, what kind of features, what can you do with your products to help make your products better? Right?
So what we're talking about is the value for the organization and the value from the end user. Do you understand that?
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct.
Before we go there, would we share the links with the data that you just mentioned on the blog post?
We absolutely will, right? So I'll put those in the show notes. So if you want to read more, then please do put a comment in. Happy to discuss further at a later date.
Right.
So I think the thing that most of most of the folks that we work with, and most of the folks probably in our social circles are talking about, is how can I use these tools to become more efficient? Now, I've already kind of shared my thoughts and feelings around how this might impact software developers. So my take on this is, yes, for software developers, if you're a senior software developer, using these kind of tools can definitely help you move faster, help you bootstrap your processes, right? So let's say, for example, I spend a large amount of time writing DBT models or deploying DBT for clients. I don't want to have to repeat the same kind of setup process each and every time. It's time consuming. Whereas if I can ask something like ChatGPT to generate that kind of skeleton that I can then go flesh out, that's a huge time saving for me. And I think this works well for kind of the senior engineers who have a good idea of what they're doing, because of certain issues, which we'll get to later with these kind of tools. Then for kind of like the other white collar jobs, so these are folks who are basically spending time in front of computers, who are doing lots of tasks that have vast amounts of kind of repetitive functionality. So it could be sending emails, it could be summarizing documents, things like that. The kind of typical things that people spend a vast amount of time on the outputs are super valuable, but the time taken to do them, really, it could be better spent, right? So it could be coming up with new ideas, building new things. Those kind of tasks are, I think, exactly where you as a business can save a boatload of time and make your time back by using tools like LLMs. And it seems pretty straightforward, fairly risk-free as well, right? In theory, because you're not like doing data analytics, you're not really kind of having to underwrite anything that could potentially come back and bite you.
And does it work also for external? Let's say if I want to read a blog post and I don't want to go through 6 minutes reading the blog post, I'm just saying random numbers again. Can I use that to summarize? Can I use LLMs to summarize that?
It's one of the great things that you can use them for, right? So these tools are effectively kind of predicting the next word. So part of the way that they work is being able to understand context, and so summarizing a large amount of text is something that they're pretty much designed to do.
Okay, now I just had an idea. Can we summarize this video with LLM?
So yes, we can, right? So this is one of the things that we've been talking about a little bit behind the scenes. Is so we record obviously a large amount of audio off the back of this. So there are tools that can be used to take audio, process it to text, which is great. So things like OpenAI's Whisperer, and then you can feed that text then into something like ChatGPT, which can produce a summary. And again, we use the right kind of prompts. You say, ChatGPT, please summarize this text and give me 5 key things as a table, and boom, you've got your podcast summary or something like this. Obviously, I haven't done that yet, but that's exactly the kind of thing that we can do, and we probably should do.
Okay. Anything else on the moving faster?
I think that's kind of the high level of moving faster.
And we can also say this is just an introductory episode, and we're gonna go deeper on those topics later on, right, in the year.
Yeah, I think we'll have to, right? And then we can also go much deeper into the kind of technology and how this stuff works. I think it's probably for the moment something that we can gloss over.
The second part you say was about how to deliver value to clients.
Right, yeah. So assuming you've got your engineers or whoever jamming away at their computers and producing these features, how do you want to then start leveraging these tools to make your actual kind of products better? So there's a couple of examples that we can go through. So the first is something that I really, really like. So this is the Khan Academy, Khan Migo, I believe it's called. I don't know if you've seen the talk. If you haven't, we'll link it in the show notes. It's 15 minutes of your life, absolutely worth going to listen to. So Sol Khan is the guy behind Khan Academy, and part of their new product is providing children or pupils, students, with a bot that can give them a fully interactive experience. It's like having a private tutor. You're effectively getting a much better, much more involved experience than you might do if you were a regular in the UK kind of public school child, right? So large class sizes, you maybe don't have as much attention as you might want. In theory, these kind of bots can help you learn in a different way. So that kind of, I think I talked about this on another podcast or possibly in a blog post, is this kind of Socratic process, question and answer style learning. So leading you to understanding why you're solving or how you're solving that problem as opposed to giving you the answer.
One thing that I loved about that talk is that it just flips the narrative that LLMs may be bad for academy, right? And that's what I loved about the talk. So if you want to, again, the link is going to be in show notes. We spoke about this in the last Digital Pulse episode. Go watch it, because the power of this tool depends on how you use it, right? It can be bad or it can be extremely good.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good use case of these tools for basically making education much more interesting. And so he talks about a student asking the bot to behave like the person she's supposed to be writing about or something like this. And it's just wonderful. It's very good. I mean, it's very convincing, but let's not forget, right? These things, they're not human, right? It is very good at pretending to.
Yeah, but I mean, you can clearly see how that bot is adding an advantage to the platform, right? That is going to make it better for the end user, because they're going to have a personal trainer. And obviously, it's going to make it better for Khan Academy, because they're going to get more users, right?
Exactly where I was going to go, right? Assuming it works well, right? You're going to go talk to your friends, say, I'm using this tool and I've learned this because there's this thing that it pretends to be, I don't know, Albert Einstein, and it tells me about physics, and this is amazing. And so the thing that this really reminds me of is this book by a chap called Neil Stevenson. It's The Diamond Age, or the Young Lady's Primer, and it's about a child who's not from a particularly wealthy background, and she ends up in possession of this kind of tool that teaches her based on the scenario that she's in or the situation she's in. And I love the idea of kind of LLMs being used in that kind of case now.
Any other example?
That book is a bit more expansive.
Sorry. Any other case for the end users? Or do we want to jump to B2B maybe?
So I think for end users, we'll quickly touch on it because we're big users of Notion, right? So one of the things, I mean, we kind of got to this earlier with writing emails and summarizing documents, right? So of course, the other thing is if you're trying to produce a draft of a document, it can be, I mean, this could be a very official document. It could be, blog post. Giving the tool some bullet points and then asking it to flesh something out can be super useful just for helping you get over that kind of initial kind of writer's block or something like that. I think that is another great use case. Again, not particularly risky.
Yeah. So again, if you embed that in your product, you are helping your clients, and some more clients are going to stick with you. If you don't do it, they may go somewhere else where the functionality is, right? Already.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They're going to leave you for the newer, sexier LLMs.
Cool. Yeah. And that's for end user, right?
That's for kind of like the regular people on the street, let's say.
Okay. What about for B2B? What about B2B? For yes?
Yeah, some interesting kind of uses here. So a lot of the stuff that we see is about people working in incredibly complex domains, right? So this could be finance, transport industry, logistics, whatever that may be. And so in order for them to do their jobs, they're inevitably dealing with either a complex domain space that they need to perhaps understand. They might be fresh graduates or whatever else. Having a tool that can help you understand the kind of wider context and where to go next for help, super useful. It basically allows your analysts to move from being 6 to 12 months being truly effective to maybe 2 to 3 months. And if let's pretend you're building some sort of kind of ERP system, so that's a kind of an enterprise resource planning system. Typically, the development of these tools is pretty slow. But let's assume that you've got an army of developers who are using generative AI to crank out features at an incredible pace. On the flip side of that, you've got your customers who are going to be trying to use your software. Now they're going to get hit with a whole bunch of new features, and that's assuming that they already understand the system that they're using already. But using something like an LLM, you can integrate an intelligent agent into your product that it kind of sits in the background, watches what people do. And again, I'm going to use words that make this sound like it's an intelligent thing, that it's like general AI, and that's not my intention. It's just I can't think of other words to use at this point. It does make me cringe a bit inside. But anyway, so these things can watch what you're doing. You ask them questions and they have a memory, so you can set them up to kind of remember context. And what that means is if they're able to understand what your kind of function is, beyond just I pass the butter, is it can then help you identify the right kind of features that you might want to use to do your job faster. So you might be doing a particular process and it might be able to help you say, well, actually, Dan, you don't want to do it like this. We have a function in this particular set of the software that will help you do this faster and better. And that's kind of where I see that kind of stuff going. We have some interesting conversations with people trying to think about how they might go about doing this.
I've seen another example, and you tell me if this is something that is realistic, where you can actually, if you have different part of your systems that they don't talk to each other, you don't have an API there, you can actually use LLM to make them merge data. You can actually, I don't know, glue the data together through LLM?
Yeah, so you can get LLMs to do various bits of kind of programming for you and executing certain functions under certain sets of conditions. Now there are different ways of doing this, and some are more reliable than others. But so my take on this at the moment is that if this is anything kind of fundamental, so these systems are non-deterministic, right? So you ask it the same question several times, you're going to get a different answer each time. Now I might be sufficiently far removed from what's going on at the moment that there are fixes here, but as I understand it, these tools aren't 100% reliable. So I would be cautious. This would be something that I'd use it for, but you're going to have to build a system around it to make sure that it's doing what you expect it to do. And that poses new and interesting problems, right? We've been talking about machine learning doing stuff like this for a long time, which we can get to next. That set of problems isn't solved. While Gen AI is much more accessible, I think, than machine learning as it was, it has some similar problems too.
Yeah, that makes total sense, Dan. And you know what? I'm gonna try to find the source of this information. I'm gonna try to find where I listened to that. I'm gonna link that on the show notes as well, so maybe people can make up their own minds, or have a look at what I was mentioning to get more context.
Yeah, no, good shout.
So what is next?
Right, so I think we've briefly touched on this. So these tools, so they're not perfect, right? So they're all seeing, all knowing. And so we know that they make mistakes. So, and the problem is they make mistakes, but they're incredibly convincing around the kind of mistakes they make.
They're very confident about their mistakes.
Incredibly confident about the mistakes they make. And I do wish, I could be as convinced when I'm totally wrong. Make my life much easier, right? But so we know about this kind of term called hallucination, right? So this is, I'm going to ask ChatGPT to give me a summary about, I don't know, some scientific research. And as it goes away and it's telling me all about B cells and what they do, it's going to provide me some links to some papers. And I'm going to go click on those links. It's going to take me to, it's going to be a 404 or something. And that paper doesn't exist. And what I find funny is that people don't get what's going on there, right? So they assume that the generative AI is actually intelligent, and it's gone off and it's found these links, and these things should be real. And what you've actually got the bot to do is to do exactly what it's supposed to do, which is to generate a set of links, because all it's doing is creating text based on some previous text and context to try and please you, right? And so that's really good. And it's not just scientists that have been caught up by this. I think there's a couple of lawyers in the US, right, who quoted a case in court that was completely fabricated by generative AI, which is absolutely wonderful. And so if you were going to take your team and you're going to say, well, I don't need senior engineers anymore, I'm going to have a bunch of grads because they're cheaper, but I'm going to give them AI, and my product's going to be just as good. It's like, that's not how this is going to pan out. That's going to end badly.
Not just that, but if you decide to just embed AI in your product, right, LLMs in your product, and give this to the user without any guardrails, I would say we can warn you, right, that can end badly. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. So this is where a bunch of people are putting in a large amount of work around things like prompt engineering and trying to make sure by many shot or multi-shot kind of training, again, using the wrong words here, not going to get too specific, but they're trying to mitigate the risk that they expose themselves to by doing certain things. Now, this is also going to depend on what you're trying to do. So if you're trying to get these things to do analytics for you, you're going to have to be much more cautious than perhaps you're going to need to be around summarizing documents, which you're still going to need to check. I think you would be remiss not to. But if we hop back to the Khan Migo thing, right? So this kind of made the news. So they've started trialing it in a school, or a series of schools. And one of the problems that the teachers gave it was something along the lines of, can you count the consonants in the word mathematics? And it goes off, and it's supposed to be, we talked about this, it's a Socratic approach. So it's supposed to lead the student to the answer. So how do you do it? This is what a consonant is. This is what a vowel is. Can you do it? And it didn't. It just turned around and said, well, the answer is this. Completely breaking immersion, if you're a fan of being in video games, right? And then on the flip side of that, so Khan has two particular setups. One is for kind of students and the other is for the teachers. And it turns out, and this is perhaps even better, is that it gave the wrong answer to the teachers. And it's like, was that on purpose? Is that they're just keeping the teachers on their toes to make sure the answer is right? You have to double check these things. People are becoming far too confident, as I said, in their ability to deliver the same thing again and again and it be right.
Can we say that again? If you want to do this, you're gonna have to hire experts. You're gonna get to rely on people that understand fundamentally what this is, how it works, because it's probably fundamentally different to what we're using at the moment. So much so that many experts say themselves that they don't have fully understood how the system works internally.
But this is certainly true of OpenAI, right? So we don't really know much about even what ChatGPT 4 is, how it works. So yes, there is a certain amount of, you need to work with people who have spent some time with this stuff, who've been burnt by it. But this is true of a lot of things in technology, specifically around making any kind of choice in the data space, is that it's the errors that people make that really shape them into delivering a decent enough solution for you. Or at least that's my take on it. Right?
But
plenty of mistakes.
What I'm trying to say is that fundamentally, this is not just a framework that you can take, embed, and use, right? Because the output is unpredictable. It's not the usual thing that we know, that you put an input, you expect an output, right? And if it's not like that, there is a bug. Someone is going to have to fix that bug. LLMs doesn't work that way. So if you want to use LLM, please be careful. Bring in experts to help you with the problem.
No, it's a really good shout on something I was kind of alluded to earlier, right?
Okay, so we say that you have to understand this. Can we help the people understand this? Can we talk a little bit about the history of LLMs and what else is there? Because we know that it's not just LLMs.
Yeah. So one of the things, my personal kind of pet peeve at the moment, is everyone's talking about AI. So AI is like a huge field, to the point that there's a wonderful book, Artificial Intelligence, A Modern Approach. I would suggest everyone goes out and has a look at it, at least familiarize yourself with it, even if it's just the first few chapters. Inside this big umbrella of artificial intelligence, you've got kind of machine learning. So machine learning was pretty much the go-to solution for every kind of problem the IT industry faced a few years back, right? So it was basically the silver bullet. And if you had a system that was misbehaving, so you have an observability platform, it's collecting data and something doesn't look right, well, you can just use machine learning on top of that to work out when something's going wrong and do the right thing. If that's terminate it and start something new, or raise an incident. If you've got customers who are not converting, they're dropping off in a particular part of your onboarding process, I can use machine learning to solve that. You've got some fraud going on. Well, you know what? We can use machine learning to identify that fraud, rank it, and present it to people to analyze. So it was kind of like this big old silver bullet for all of the world's problems. What I kind of noticed, though, was that over time, people shift. Like, machine learning is not particularly sexy, and like the name's just a bit, statistical machine learning, bit dull, right? AI is much more marketable. And so I noticed, this is quite a few years back, this kind of pre-deep learning, so about 2015, before 2015, people started calling it AI again, because AI prior to that was a bit of a dirty word. And over the years, I kind of noticed people kind of shifted away from ML to ML and AI, and then AI and ML, and then it's gone back to AI. And I'm thinking, this is wonderful, because now we're going to talk about a whole bunch of more problems. It's a bigger space. There's more opportunities here. But what's actually happened is we've kind of gone back on ourselves. So LLMs have happened, and so LLMs are built around what's called deep learning. And so inside this machine learning bubble, you've got things like perceptrons, which are neural nets. And then inside that, you've got deep learning. So deep learning is kind of effectively a neural net with many hidden layers. So you've got input layer, lots of hidden layers and output layer. And then within the deep learning sphere, you've then got the LLM bubble, which is awesome. But what this means is that everyone is talking about AI when what I think they really mean is generative AI. But what they really mean is LLMs. And I say that because you've then got things like Midjourney and whatever else. And I think you said this earlier, right? It's that they've been around longer. People have been using them, yes, but it really is this ChatGPT thing that has just made this kind of field explode once again.
Hey, I remember when we were saying it's not AI, it's just machine learning.
Yeah.
We were seeing that, I would say every other week, right?
Yeah. And there is still good use cases for statistical machine learning. It is not dead. Like, you can't just take large language models and solve every problem with large language models. And I think this is the point that we're at now, is that if you want to use these tools to bootstrap your engineers, that's absolutely fine. I think that's kind of an obvious choice, right? There are a bunch of tools out there from, so we usually like to beat on Amazon a little bit, but they've got Code Whisperer now, which from what I saw at the AWS Summit, looks absolutely amazing.
Let's go there, right, as a last point. But first, I wanted to ask you, so we said that you better bring in experts, right? What is the second best option if you cannot bring in experts and you want to bootstrap something yourself before bringing in experts? You reference a book, you mentioned the book, right? Can we link any other resources for people to understand the difference between AI, machine learning, deep learning, LLMs?
Good resources at the moment, I think, are pretty hard to come by, to be honest. So this particular book that I talked about earlier doesn't talk about LLMs quite as you might expect, right? This is actually quite it's 1,000 pages it's a proper technical book. For broader kind of stuff, I'm trying to write a few summaries, and there are a number of different good summaries into this stuff, and we'll link those in the show notes. So some are interactive that will help you understand how we've arrived at these so transformer models are basically what power large language models, and it will take you from it'll go top down. So it will take you from things like your basic neurons all the way down multi-layer perceptrons through to transformers, LSTMs. We'll link those in the show notes. But there's a lot of stuff to take on board, about how you encode data, how you handle data, where data comes from, what you need to do to prepare it, and then how you actually go about building and using these tools, which we'll get to in the the final section. The key problem here is that there's a lot of things happening, and it's very, very, very hard to keep up with. It's kind of become, for me, almost a bit of a full-time job. And I know I'm not alone in the company. There are a couple of other folks, and we are trying to stay abreast of what's going on. It is genuinely, it's hard.
But if they follow the digital pulse, we're going to bring back those in our episodes. And so if you follow digital pulse, again, everything.delivery/digital pulse, we're going to mention those news every 2 weeks, indeed. And you can keep up to date with those documents, right?
Of course, every 2 weeks will be sufficiently out of date at that particular point, right? It is literally daily at this point. But yeah, the big things that pop out to us, we'll try and raise in digital pulse too. That's a good shout. I completely forgot about digital pulse.
Okay, so let's close this, right? What are the options out there at the moment that people can use to implement LLM, or to use LLM, or to, I don't know, whether embed LLM in their products?
Right, so there's really 3 ways that you can go at this, and I'm going to assert that there are actually only 2 options for most companies. If you've got deep pockets, you're a big company, you know what you're doing, you've got this expertise, and it really is expertise, like proper domain wizards who've been doing this for a long time. You can go and you can collect data, you can spend a vast amount of money, and you can build one of these models for yourself. That is an option. So companies like Bloomberg are doing things like this. They've built their own model, a specific model for doing financial analysis, right? And that's pretty cool. Now, they are not most companies. So where does that leave the rest of us? You can use an open source model, something like Falcon or any of the Mosaic models, or you could even potentially use Mosaic itself to build yourself your own model. But I think we'll skip on from there. So these are open source models that you can use in a particular domain to solve particular problems, but you can build on them, right? So you can go ahead, you can start doing things like the prompt engineering and the fine tuning. You can feed them data that you own, so proprietary information. Now this is good, because if you are working on something that's super secretive and you absolutely don't want Microsoft or Amazon to have any kind of awareness of your data, being able to internally host a model and do something with it is basically, you have to be able to do that. And so things, as I say, Mosaic's a great place to look. The Falcon model has been getting a lot of attention, and you can see the open source community really rapidly iterating about this. And there's a new, relatively new tool called Open LLM, which allows you to kind of play with some of these things. And it's also worth pointing out that it was earlier this week that Databricks, so this is a company who has a wonderful reputation for doing a vast amount of open source work, so like all of their kind of core products and Delta Lake through Spark, MLflow, that are all open source. They've got gone and spent a small amount of 1.3 billion on Mosaic. So you've got Mosaic, who have got this platform for LLMs and have been very pro open source work. You've got Databricks, huge company in the data space, pro open source. They also did Dolly very early on. Coming together, that could be super interesting. I think that's probably a great, if I was a betting man, which I'm not, that's where I'd start putting my money. And then you've got kind of the lowest hanging fruit, which has all of the kind of things that you might expect around kind of worries around security and sharing your data. I think it was Samsung, right, who ended up leaking secrets. You can go ahead and you can use one of these open AI APIs, something like that. I'm sure there are others that are currently just escaping my brain, but that gives you a very low entry point into being able to integrate these tools into your products. They have pros, as say they're self-hosted, or they're hosted by somebody else. You don't have to worry about them staying up. You don't have to worry about doing things with them. You can go ahead and you can expose data to them as well if you want to, using tools, for your kind of vector stores, whatever else. You can build all of the bots, and you've got this lovely ecosystem that allows you to drive them. So things like LangChain. That is arguably the easiest way to go. And from what I'm seeing at the moment, that is the choice that most companies seem to be rolling with. And I suspect part of that is down to things like Microsoft partnering with OpenAI. And then if you look at Amazon, they've got a new product coming out called Bedrock, which has a whole bunch of options open to you. And prior to that, so if you're not lucky enough to be kind of an early access user of Bedrock, you can still fall back to using things like SageMaker, as far as I'm aware.
Okay, so
I'm not entirely sure what's going on Google.
We can say that we are experimenting with some of those tools ourselves to understand which one, what are the pros and cons of each one of those. But also the market is moving so fast that it's possible that new tools are going to be launched every month or something like that, right? It's moving very fast.
I mean, what was the old joke with JavaScript, right? It's every day brings a new framework. And at the moment, it's pretty much true for the large language model space.
So
every day something new.
So just to wrap the episode, right, we discussed about the value of LLMs and some of the risk of LLMs, and the fact that you better work with someone that knows what it's doing, or bring in someone that knows what it's doing. We discussed a little bit of history, showing the difference between AI, machine learning, deep learning, and LLMs, right, discussing a little bit of that. And then we presented some of the options you have to embed LLMs or these AI, if you want to use the marketing term.
Just AI.
Just AI, into your products. So the next step is possibly we're going to talk a little bit deeper on each one of those topics. And we also say that possibly we may launch a new format. We're going to try to drive you through the old process of embedding some AI into a system. Is that right?
Yep. So we're going to try and go end to end, full on. We're going to write the code and, as you say, embed an LLM into something. What that is yet? Too soon for spoilers, I think.
So if you are interested about that, if you're interested about news on the market, if you're interested about topics, technical topics, but looked from the perspective of the value you can bring to your organization, your product, please subscribe to this podcast. You can find this on YouTube at youtube.com/@everythingdelivery, on Spotify, or on Apple Podcast and Google Podcast. You can find us individually in most of the social network, Twitter, Discord, LinkedIn. Reach out to us. We just created a LinkedIn group called Everything Delivery, where we think we're going to post updates, right? Including updates outside of the regular podcast. Like if you find new links, new documents, new sources for data, we're going to post it there. So you can also go there and subscribe to that. Please like this video, share it. Thanks a lot for listening. And is there anything else you want to say, Dan?
No, I'd thoroughly enjoyed this, and yeah, hopefully going to follow up with some more technical deep dives. It should be fun.
Okay, thanks a lot for listening. We'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye bye.